Here in this video we will assess the size of Meraxes, one of the dragons that came with Aegon and his sister wives during the Conquest, the other two being Vhagar and Balerion the Black Dread. But how do we know the size, you may ask? Well, in episode 4 of season 2 in House of the Dragon, one of the dragon skulls was shown in Dragonstone, placed on a large altar, which we will tell you in a while that this one belongs to the dragon Meraxes. Anyway, with that skull taken into consideration, we will analyze and extrapolate the size of the dragon. But before that, we will talk a bit about her lore and her background, and then after estimating the size, we will compare her with other dragons from the series. So let's get to it. So Meraxes was a she-dragon of House Targaryen, ridden by Queen Rhaenys Targaryen during Aegon's conquest. Named after an old Valyrian god, Meraxes hatched upon Dragonstone during the Century of Blood, a chaotic period following the Doom of Valyria. She participated heavily during Aegon's conquest, but not as much as Aegon himself and Visenya on Vhagar, although she was seen on her dragon during the Last Storm and the Field of Fire, both of which are decisive battles during the Conquest. At the Battle of the Last Storm on the ground, Rhaenys on Meraxes slew many Storm's End soldiers, engulfing Argilac's vanguard and the knights of his personal guard in Dragonflame. Then, all the dragons, including hers, took part in the famous Field of Fire, the only battle in which all three dragons, Balerion, Vhagar and Meraxes, took to the sky during Aegon's conquest. In the year 4 AC, the First Dornish War was started, and 6 years later in 10 AC at Hellholt, an iron bolt from a scorpion from one of the Dornish soldiers went through Meraxes' skull, went through the eye, into the skull, and the dragon and Rhaenys fell from the sky to their deaths. In Meraxes' death throes, she destroyed the castle's highest tower and part of the curtain wall, and with that, the dragon and her rider met their ends. So Meraxes was named after one of the gods of Valyria, and was said to be capable of swallowing an entire horse whole. In the world of ice and fire, Meraxes is described as having silvery scales, though this isn't clear if it was only one solid color throughout, or if its primary color was silver and it had different secondary colors, just like Balerion and Drogon, which were primarily black but still having hints and touches of red all over. She was older and larger than Vhagar during the Conquest, and until her death in 4 AC, she was bigger than her, although I might add that Vhagar was still young at the time and eventually outlived and grew to an old age of 181 years, dying in the Dance of the Dragons, slowly growing to the size that was almost as large as Balerion, which means Vhagar during the Dance of the Dragons was larger than Meraxes was during the Conquest. Now we come to the crux of the topic. Let's take a look at the skull and then assess the size of the dragon that belongs to it. So this skull was pretty large, a large skull placed on an altar, for the Targaryens revered their dragons, even the dead ones, especially those that were pretty important in their history. We know for a fact that, other than the older dragons that Aenar, the ancestor of Aegon, brought to Dragonstone when he fled the Doom of Valyria, the ones that he brought to Dragonstone were not really significant. The only other three dragons that died since their arrival in Westeros before the dance were Balerion, Quicksilver and Meraxes. Balerion's skull is kept within the Red Keep in a similar altar. Quicksilver's skull would be as small as that of Vermax, or maybe as large as Sunfire's, since the dragon was barely 20 years when it was killed by Balerion. Therefore, the only other dead dragon, a revered one at that, was of course Meraxes. Thus we can infer with 99% surety that the skull here belongs to Meraxes. Now how do we know the size of a dragon that was dead a century before the Dance of the Dragons? So we shall have to take a look at the skull. In one of the scenes we see a room full of furniture, Rhaenyra and a skull in the background. This is episode 4 of season 2 in House of the Dragon. So to get the size of the skull here, we would have to do a bit of magic. We shall first take a look at the table here in the foreground. Then we place a 6 feet tall or 183 centimeters tall soldier right next to Rhaenyra here, and then assess how tall the table is relative to the soldier. Done, right? So now we copy the same table, and with some geometry work that I barely remember from school, we assess how large this table will be if it was in the other room that has the skull. Then now we adjust the soldier's size according to the table in that room, and voila, we have a reference size. So then now we take the trusty scale and place it next to the soldier, adjusting a bit so that the top of the helmet is seen to be a little bit over the 6 feet line, cause pointy helmets add height, obviously. Then take the same scale and then place it horizontally beside the dragon's skull. And here we have one that is roughly 2.7 meters or 9 feet in length, way larger than that of Drogon's or Syrax's skull. Next we have edited a skull that greatly resembles that of Meraxes as reference, placing it next to a soldier with a blank background for clarity. Then we also edited a Targaryen dragon head of the same size, and doing the same, we just placed it in a blank background. Just to be sure, we added a horse there, confirming the legend that Meraxes was so large she could have swallowed a horse whole, which checks out fine here. Now imagining that Meraxes has a similar body design to Drogon and the other similar dragons, her possessing the most common dragon body shape here, we then extrapolate the scale. We get a dragon that is between 160 to 165 feet or between 45 to 50 meters in length. With this length, she could stand to be 11 meters or 36 feet tall at the shoulder and have a wingspan of 80 to 90 meters or between 262 and 295 feet wide. And that, my friends, is the size of Meraxes during the time of Aegon's conquest, judging from the skull. This would make Vhagar probably as large as Meleys during that time, and Balerion back then would be roughly 120 years of age, so he would still be bigger than Vermithor was during the dance. But that's what I think. Here, in comparison to the other dragons of House of the Dragon, Syrax firstly would be around half her length, maybe a little bit more than half, but the yellow dragon has stopped growing due to her being pampered and her not flying as much as before, even stopped hunting for a long time. Meraxes would be still larger than Caraxes, larger than Meleys and the other smaller dragons of the Blacks, and even the small ones of the Greens too. The dragon that would be closest to her in size would be Silverwing and probably Dreamfire too, although she would be still smaller than Vermithor by quite a lot, and the same goes to being way smaller than the old age serial killer grandma Vhagar. And with that, we come to the end of the video. Now, if you like this one, then watch this other one too, and do check out our channel, because we have a lot of dragon and monster content, things that you might haven't seen before. So like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.